If you smell what for rock is cooking.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of What for Rock is Cooking. It's about time for us to start making our pumpkin pie. But today I'm going to show you how to make pumpkin pie from scratch using real pumpkins, as well as some pumpkin chiffon pie and pumpkin cookies. Now, we can't talk about sweet pumpkin treats without talking about pumpkin spice. Pumpkin spice consists of 5 primary spices. We'll be using 3 tablespoons of cinnamon, 4 teaspoons of ginger, 3 teaspoons nutmeg, 3 teaspoons allspice, and 2 spoons of cloves. But why is that so good? Well, here's how I think of building flavors. I'm a musician.
I will lift you high, higher than the stars. Mama, don't work for God.
I've played in bands and sung in choirs my whole life, and I love creating beautiful harmony just as much as I love to cook.
Don't worry about the rhythm, baby. It's in my soul.
So when I'm building my flavor profile, I think of it the same way I would build vocal harmony, by assigning each flavor its own part and purpose. Now, pumpkin spice is a beautiful blend of flavor that makes a perfect harmony. Though, since it's such a deep flavor, I would consider it to be more of a men's chorus. So I asked some buddies from the men's chorus Chanticleer to help demonstrate this little old idea. The cinnamon is the soprano, or countertenor. It's the lightest and brightest flavor and is often the leading melodic line in the flavor of a dish. We could alternate the cinnamon and ginger as both the soprano and the alto, as there is a beautiful, sharp, piercing quality to the flavor. Yet ginger works as the alto, as it's a richer spice that helps deepen the flavor of the cinnamon. The nutmeg is our tenor. It's bright and rich, and it can work as the lead flavor in a dish. But it can also help bridge the gap between the high and low ends of our flavors. Allspice works as our baritone. It's smooth, sultry, and there's a richer quality to it that continues to deepen the flavor. And clove, that's our bass. Cloves have such a deep, dark, beautiful richness that adds a much-needed depth of harmonious flavor. Now, each of these are good individually and could still form a good harmony with just a few of these spices. But when all of these are put together, they make one badass harmony. Why, thank you, boys. Now that we have our harmony, let's start working on our symphony. First, we need to start prepping and roasting our pumpkins. Take a sugar pumpkin and a sharp-ass knife, cut off the stem and split the pumpkin in twain. Grab a bowl and a big-ass spoon and start scraping out all them seeds. Next, grease them up with some olive oil, spreading it around with your hands. Come on, use those meats of yours. We are making everything by hand today. Finally, flip them pumpkins on over so the liquid released doesn't just, pool in there. And pop it into the oven at 400 degrees for 40 minutes or until it can be easily punctured by a paring knife. We're also going to roast an apple, so give it a peel and just a rough, simple cut. It's getting mashed anyway. Who cares what it looks like? I don't care. Come on. Once those pumpkins are done, let them cool a bit and start scooping out all that orangey goodness with your big-ass spoon. Then finally, get those apples on out of here. We don't need you yet. Come on, get out of here. Now we have a bunch of good pumpkin to use for our baked goods. Now, speaking of baked, let's start on our doughs. For our pumpkin pie crust, we need 2 cups of all-purpose flour and some ice water, 1 tablespoon of sugar with 1 teaspoon of fine sea salt, and 2 cold, stiff sticks of unsalted butter. Yeah, baby. We're going to start off by cutting our butter into half-inch cubes. Then we're putting our dry ingredients into a food processor. Pulsing it a few times to mix it on up, then add your butter, pulsing it a few more times until it becomes the texture of good moist sand. Put your flour butter mixture into a bowl and start pouring in your water a little bit at a time until it becomes pliable and just a little tacky. And make sure to mix it with your hands. Again, we're making everything by hand, and making a good dough is more about the feel, the texture of the dough. It's more than just combining ingredients, and I love it. I love it a lot. Finally, form the dough into a rough disc, wrap it in plastic wrap, and put it in the fridge for about 20 minutes to let the gluten relax. The nice thing is you can make this a few days ahead of time and keep it in the fridge. Just let it come to room temperature before you start working with it. And now that this dough's done, we done gotta get cooking up our cookie dough, huh? Whew, that looks like a lot, but it's actually pretty simple. All we need is 2 cups of our pumpkin mash with a roasted apple, 1 cup of brown sugar, 1/2 cup liquid coconut oil, 2 to 3 tablespoons of our pumpkin pie spice, 1/4 cup chia seeds that we'll be putting into 1 cup of water, a few good pinches of kosher salt, some delicious bourbon barrel-aged Vermont maple syrup, and 4 cups of all-purpose flour. Let's start off by soaking our chia. Just put the seeds in the water, giving it a little stir, and set it aside so our seed can get thick and creamy. Go ahead and grab a mixing bowl and add in the apple and the pumpkin. Smash it on up with a fork. Then start adding in all the ingredients except for the flour, giving that a little old mixeroonie. Now, let's check on our chia. If the seeds haven't absorbed all the water yet, just go ahead and give it a quick mix, set it aside, and wait a minute until your seed gets nice, creamy, and thick. Scoop in your seed and mix it around. This really helps to give these cookies a nice, chewy texture. And finally, add your flour in batches, mixing it around thoroughly until you have a thick, sticky dough on your hands. Now, the original recipe comes from Jet Set Fork, their Lembas bread recipe. It's made with fewer ingredients and banana instead of pumpkin, but I loved it so much that I've started using it as a base for all sorts of baked goods. If you want to give it a gander, links in the description. Finally, pour the dough into a smaller bowl, cover it with plastic wrap, and pop that bad boy in the fridge for at least an hour so your pie dough has somebody to chill with. Get it? Chill. It has 2 meanings. Well, now you see we've put both in the refrigerator. For our chiffon crust, we'll need a 1/2 cup brown sugar, a tablespoon of pumpkin spice, 1 cup of butter, and 3 cups or 1 box of graham crackers. I'm gonna melt your butter. Boop, yes I am. First off, we gotta break those crackers into smaller pieces, put them in your food processor, then give those puny pieces some perfunctory pulses until you have a nice, coarse powder. Next, mix together your dry ingredients, and then add your butter. Do it just a little bit at a time, mix it on in, make sure that it all gets incorporated. You want the mixture to be pliable, so add more butter if you feel you need it. Grease up the bottom and the sides of a 9 by 13 inch baking dish. Grease the bottom. Then start pouring in your cracker mixture. Spread it around while breaking up any clumps that you find. Then start pressing it on out, fitting it to the sides of the pan. Now make sure to get into every nook, and so help me God, if I see one cranny missing, I'm gonna come on over there and kick your cranny. The next step is to pre-bake the crust. Put it in at 375 degrees for 7 to 10 minutes, or until the edges slightly start to brown and solidify. Now if you want to be a cool guy like me, you'll set the crust aside to let it cool completely. Speaking of cool, take your pie crust out of the fridge and let's start getting it hot. Well, room temperature, let's get it hot later. Go ahead and flour your work surface, flour your dough, then grab your rolling pin and, flour it, I guess. Then start rolling out your dough. You can give it some force, but don't go too hard. You don't want to crush it. Just keep going with smooth, gentle, easy strokes. Yeah. And keep rolling the dough until it's about a 1/4 inch thick. Now we're going to start folding the dough into a triangle. This is going to help us keep the dough from tearing when we start putting it in our 9-inch pie dish. Next, grab a 9-inch pie dish and then place the dough with the point in the center and start unfolding it. I forgot to film it, but it's always a good idea to place your pie dish upside down on the flattened dough to make sure that you have enough coverage for your dish. Next, start trimming off the excess dough, start pressing your dough into the pan, and start crimping the edges by pinching it together with the sides of your fingers. This is primarily a decorative step, and honestly, the shape didn't hold very well for me, so I would suggest crimping it a bit tighter than I did. But man, it sure looked pretty. Next, we need to make a pie weight by laying out some parchment paper or tin foil over the crust and filling it with something that can spread across the surface area, like rice or beans. The point of the pie weight is to keep the bottom from bubbling up and becoming overcooked. Now press it down to fill out all those nooks, and you know how I feel about those crannies. Now this is totally optional, but you can start trimming off all that excess paper. Then put it in a 400-degree oven for 15 to 19 minutes or until the edges have begun to dry out. While our surface is still covered in flour, let's take out our cookie dough. Put a little flour on your hands to keep them from sticking as we pull our dough onto our floured work surface. You know what? I need a little more flour. Let's go ahead and just sprinkle a little bit more on there, and oh yeah. Once it's on there, we're going to go ahead and cut it into quarters to make it more manageable. Sprinkle on a little flour, then start forming it into any shape you want to roll it out in. It could be a rectangle, a circle, a cookie dough decahedron, whatever. Just like we did with the pie crust, go ahead and start rolling out your dough firmly, but gently. Roll the dough until it's about a ½ inch thick, then take any cookie cutter you want and start cutting out your shapes. All I have is these round ones, so I'm just going to go with that. Just press it down, give it a little twist, and repeat. With this leftover cookie dough, we're going to treat it just like we did at the beginning. Smush it on up, roll it on out, and start cutting out more cookies. Now, I don't like to waste things. We're going to go ahead and ball up our cookie dough, put down our cookie cutter, and just pack it on in there. Yeah, I know it's not the prettiest of the bunch, but it's what's on the inside that counts. And the inside of this has some delicious pumpkin. Now that we've learned our shapes, we can start learning our letters. We're going to go ahead and cut X's into each one of these cookies. This will help keep them from bubbling on up. Once we're done cutting these, we're going to pop them in the oven at 300 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes, or until they're firm but nice and tender. And then when they're done, just place them on a cooling rack and let them chill. Now that our cookies are done, let's go ahead and check back on our pie crust. We're going to remove the pie weight and give it a look. Well, it's looking good, but the bottom is still a bit soggy. Nobody wants a soggy bottom, so we're going to go ahead and put it back in the oven for another 10 minutes or so to finish her on off. And now our pie crust is done. It's looking quite pretty, but I forgot to turn it around in the oven, so part of it got a little too dark. We can fix it, but first we need to make a few other things, like some homemade whipped cream. This creamy delight's going to need 3 cups of heavy whipping cream, 5 to 6 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 1 packet of unflavored gelatin, and we're going to be sneaking in just a little bit of vanilla extract for some good flavor. First, put in your gelatin into about a 1/4 cup of cold water and give that a little old mixer-rooney-roo. Attach your whisk attachment to your stand mixer, pour in your heavy cream, then turn on your stand mixer to medium to start activating that cream. Turn on your stand mixer to medium. Well, plug in your stand mixer and turn it on to medium to start activating your cream. After 2 to 3 minutes, add in your sugar and wait about another 5 to 10 minutes, or until it starts to thicken before adding your gelatin. The reason we're adding gelatin is to stabilize the whipped cream so it keeps its shape, instead of looking like our tears running down our face after finding out our beautiful whipped cream started melting. Once it starts to thicken, add your vanilla extract and your gelatin and whisk for another 2 to 3 minutes or until you have some stiff peaks. Give it a taste, enjoy the hell out of it, and then give it a quick mix to ensure you don't have any lumps. You don't want lumpy whipped cream, that's stupid. But do you know what's not stupid? This pumpkin chiffon pie we're about to make. Yeah! Let's get cooking. We're going to start with 30 ounces of pumpkin, 2 tablespoons pumpkin pie spice, 13.6 ounces of vanilla instant pudding mix, and 2 cups of whipped cream. We're going to start by turning this pumpkin mash into a puree. We want it to be silky smooth to contrast the crunchy texture of that crispy graham cracker crust. Even the name is a delicate name. Chiffon, chiffon, chiffon. Anyway, we're going to add a splash of apple cider before we start blasting the out of that pumpkin. Pour it into a bowl, then mix in the pumpkin spice and instant pudding mix. I know we're not making the pudding mix from scratch, but this is used more as a thickening agent for our chiffon than to add flavor. Think of it like adding pectin when you're making jam. Finally, add that whipped cream. Now you can use a tub of Cool Whip if you don't want to make it from scratch, if you're a little baby. But Cool Whip is a stabilized whipped cream, and having a stabilized whipped cream is more important than making your own. Go ahead and mix that whipped cream into that pumpkin. Then start scooping it in your graham cracker crust. Smooth it on out with a rubber spatula, and then we're just going to top it with a little bit more whipped cream. And there we have it. Our smooth, silky chiffon pie is done. Something this smooth deserves a fitting name. I'm gonna call it chiffon Urkel. And now that that's done, let's go ahead and start making our icing for our cookies. We're gonna need a 1/4 cup each of whole milk and heavy cream, 1 teaspoon pumpkin spice and 3 tablespoons maple syrup, and a 1/4 cup of melted butter with 2 cups of confectioner sugar. Put all your ingredients into the sugar, give it a quick mix, and pour it into a bowl. Melt this in the microwave for 30 to 40 seconds. Grab a brush and start painting those happy little cookies. Once you're done, put them to the side to let the icing re-solidify. But now, it's time for what we're all here for. That pumpkin pie! We're gonna need 2 to 3 tablespoons of pumpkin spice, 2 large eggs, 1 large egg yolk, 1/4 cup sweetened condensed milk, and 15 ounces of roasted pumpkin mash. Now you could use store-bought, but we're gonna make our own condensed milk. All we need is 1 cup of sugar, 3½ cups of whole milk, and 1/2 cup heavy cream. First grab your milk and your heavy cream and pour it into a pot at medium-high heat. Now be careful, you don't want to spill anything, that'd be embarrassing. Next, pour in your sugar, mix it around, and bring it up to a boil. Once it starts boiling, go ahead and turn it down to a medium-low. Now, I should have started with this, but I'm going to transfer this to a wider pot to help it reduce faster. Now that everything's mixed, we really want to make sure that we're being careful about spilling things. Oh no! Let it cook and reduce until you get this rich caramel color. This took me about 50 minutes, keeping it between medium and medium-low, but I was able to let it sit, stirring it occasionally while working on other things. You could speed it up by turning up the heat, but you'd have to keep a closer eye on it. Or you could go buy it at a store, that's fine. When it's done, pour it into a measuring cup, get yourself a big-ass bowl, and start mixing in your ingredients. Make sure to crack your eggs into a separate dish before you put them in. This isn't necessary, but it's easier to pick out broken shells from a little dish than trying to dig it out of your mixture. Don't forget your single yolk. Then this next part is optional, but I like adding some vanilla extract in. Put in a 1/2 teaspoon or however much you want, this is your pie. Finally, mix it all together and start pouring it into your pie crust. Smooth it on out, then we're going to wrap some tin foil on the pie crust, shiny side out, before we pop it back in the oven. The shiny side reflects heat, so normally you'd want to put it shiny side down if you're trying to impart as much heat as you can to whatever you're cooking. But facing the shiny side out on the crust will help keep the heat from penetrating and darkening the crust too much more. You didn't think you'd learn about tinfoil today, did you? Don't worry, I got you, bro! Finally, pop it in an oven at 325 degrees for an hour to an hour and a half. Now we need to remove the tinfoil, but part of mine stuck to the filling, so make sure the foil isn't touching the filling when you put it on. The nice thing though is it gives us a chance to taste it. And it tastes fine. Damn fine. But we can't eat it yet, we need to let it cool before we cut into it. So while we wait, let's start assembling our plate of cookies. Just stack them on a decorative tray, but take the time to make it look good. We did a lot of fine work today, and we owe it to ourselves to make it look like something that we're proud of. Well, we did it. We made 3 different delicious pumpkin baked goods completely by hand using real roasted pumpkins. We made pumpkin cookies with maple icing that has a light flavor with a dense and chewy texture that feels so good on the tooth. We made pumpkin chiffon pie with homemade whipped cream and a graham cracker crust whose rich and incredibly potent flavor knocks you right on the floor. And finally, we made a damn fine pumpkin pie. We made our own sweetened condensed milk and hand-rolled crust that was crisp and buttery while the filling was one that you could truly sink your teeth into. These would be perfect to share with your family and friends this Thanksgiving. But sadly, many of us won't be able to share food or thanks with one another this year. I'm thankful I'm alive. I'm thankful you're watching this video. And I'm thankful that I get to share my passion with you. So I'm going to roll that beautiful bee footage. And I hope you have a safe and happy Thanksgiving.